Hello everyone, I'm Laurel Porter along with my colleague Stephanie Domerat. I've been your host for Straight Talk for the past 16 years and it has truly been the honor of a lifetime. But now I'm passing the torch to my good friend here, Stephanie, and I know you'll be in good hands with Stephanie as your new host of Straight Talk.
Thank you, Laurel. These are such big shoes to fill. Honestly, I don't think that you can ever fill your shoes really, but I'm so excited to take the reins on this very important show. Laurel has been a mentor for me and someone I've admired for many years, so following in her footsteps is an absolute honor. But of course, this is not goodbye.
Well,
right?
thank you for your kind words, and I'm proud to have you as my successor. I'll be filling in once in a while as a guest host and working with Stephanie from time to time. But congratulations, Stephanie.
Thank you.
And now here is Straight Talk with Stephanie Domerat.
Now on Straight Talk, a deep dive into one of the most long-standing and pivotal moments in American democracy, the presidential inauguration.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
To rebuild our country and restore its promise for all of our people.
We'll explore the pageantry, politics, and promises of this 200-year tradition, from the historic oath of office
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
to the themes shaping the new administration.
It's going to be a message of unity. And again, I think success brings unity.
The impact of this transition of power from the past to the present, right now on Straight Talk.
Hello and welcome to the first Straight Talk episode of 2025. I'm Stephanie Domerat. The start of 2025 brings with it many changes for our country. A shift in power with Republicans now controlling both chambers of Congress and the return of a Republican president to the White House. The inauguration of the 47th president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, is scheduled for Monday, January 20th. And at this pivotal moment in our nation's history, we want to take a closer look at the inauguration process itself. We'll explore what it is, its historical and cultural significance, and the political questions that accompany such a moment of great change. And we have two guests joining us today to help break down some of the key topics surrounding the inauguration. Joining us from the Oregon Historical Society is Carrie Timchuk. Carrie is a fifth-generation Oregonian and serves as the executive director of the Historical Society. He's also a graduate of Willamette University, where he earned degrees in history and law. He'll be providing us with some historical context and significance of the inaugural ceremonies. Also joining us today is Dr. Chandler James, Assistant Professor of Political Science at the University of Oregon. Dr. James's research focuses on the American presidency, public opinion, and political behavior. Some of his works include a 2022 paper titled, "Does President Trump's Outrageous Behavior Work?" And perhaps more relevant to us today, a paper titled "Partisanship and Public Support for Presidential Norms." He'll be giving us a deeper look into the political consequences of the inauguration ceremony. Welcome to both of our guests, Carrie, Dr. James. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, happy to be here.
Yeah, so great to have you both here. Okay, first, Dr. James, I'd like to start with you. We know the inauguration, of course, is a time of transition of power. It's a fundamental part of our democracy. But can you speak more to the historic and cultural significance of this day and this whole process?
So these inaugurations are critically important for our country. They serve as a marker of change, of transition. And in our democracy, this is vitally important because we have a system in which we transition from one government to the other peacefully through a political process. And so this particular ceremony serves as an indication that the process has worked and that we are moving from one administration to the next, or that a president has won and is going to serve another 4 years. Mm-hmm. So these are really important.
So, Carrie, I want to talk to you. There are some notable Oregon ties, you could say, to inauguration days of the past. For people who don't know, Carrie's just an encyclopedia of knowledge. I always like talking to you. I learn something every time. But one of those ties goes all the way back to the 16th president of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, more recently, Ronald Reagan. Tell us about these ties.
Well, too, Abraham Lincoln and his inauguration in 1861 was introduced to the inaugural crowd by one of his best friends, Senator Edward Baker, of Oregon. Baker City is named for Senator Baker.
Oh, nice.
As I said, was one of Lincoln's best friends. Lincoln named one of his sons after him. And Senator Baker would later become the only senator ever to be killed in battle. He enlisted in the Union Army while he was serving in the Senate and was killed in battle very early in the Civil War.
Wow.
A happier story is that of Mark Hatfield, Oregon's gold standard of public service. As chair of the Senate Rules Committee in 1981, that role serves as the chairman of the inaugural ceremonies. So Ronald Reagan's first swearing in, it was Senator Hatfield who presided. You would see him in all the photos. And that was the inauguration where the venue moved from the east front of the Capitol, where all you could see was a parking lot and the Supreme Court, frankly, to the west front of the Capitol with a majestic view of the monuments. And that Senator Hatfield played a role in moving from the east side to the west side. And that's where the inauguration would have been until we got the announcement that the 22-degree weather with wind chill in Washington, D.C. on Monday, it'll be moving indoors.
Yes, and that is different this year.
That is far, it's less majestic, it's less presidential. It's a very smaller crowd. I mean, instead of tens of thousands of people watching, it'll be a very limited crowd inside the rotunda or inside the statuary hall. So.
And we actually saw that last, right, with
Reagan's second inaugural in 1985.
Yes. Yeah, interesting. I know a lot of people are probably disappointed they won't be able to see everything. I know they're going to try to work around that with some ways, but yeah, it's definitely going to be something
No inaugural
different.
parade.
Yes, very different this year in that way. Okay, I want to get back to Dr. James. You're an expert, of course, as we mentioned, in political norms, traditions. Let's talk about one of the most significant, the inaugural speech. What can we take away as Americans as we watch these in general?
So the inaugural speech is an opportunity for the president to address the nation. And lots of people will be tuning in, interested in hearing what the president has to say, what President Trump has to say. And it's an opportunity for him to give his vision of the next 4 years, what he plans to do in terms of policy, what he plans to do in terms of setting the cultural standard. And I think that it's an opportunity for the president to set the tone in terms of how our discourse will unfold. And then we see in the background, oftentimes, the political establishment, previous presidents, leaders of Congress, behind the president, and Nancy Pelosi has chosen not to attend. So Michelle Obama has chosen not to attend. So it's an opportunity to see how the political establishment is reacting to the president. And in Trump's 2016 or 2017 speech, he harangued the political establishment with his so-called American Carnage speech, where he described America in pretty, what I would say, unfavorable terms, and blamed the previous administrations, Obama, Bush, Republicans, and Democrats alike, as people who were responsible for the unfavorable situation that he described. So for Trump in particular, this is a moment where we'll be keenly interested in how he will describe the state of America and how he engages with not only the public, but also his predecessors.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, absolutely. I know we've also looked back, and as you mentioned, it's such a moment for our former presidents or our incoming presidents, and we look back and we quote those, right, for so many years to follow. Many people may not know this. Carrie, a former speechwriter for Bob Dole, what do you see that you think people should know about the process going into writing these speeches?
A lot of pressure on the president and to set the stage, set the tone for his administration. And certainly we look back at John Kennedy, as you did with Ask Not speech. Franklin Roosevelt, one of his most famous lines, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." Someone to not emulate was William Henry Harrison, our 9th president, who gave a 2-hour speech, the longest speech by far ever, in a rainstorm, caught pneumonia, and died a month later, never having made a single decision as president of the United States. Don't follow his footsteps.
No, absolutely. Okay, so of course the speech, a huge part of the whole process and ceremony, very public part of it. Dr. James, have we seen in the inaugural process any changes since the first president, George Washington, took office in 1789?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of changes in many respects and a lot of continuity. So I'll focus on the change since that was your question. Initially, it was given in different spaces. It's only recently been moved to the outside of the Capitol with such a large crowd. We've seen the rise of the previous presidents standing behind and political establishment standing behind the president as they do the oath of office. Initially, for Washington, the New York State judge was the one who delivered the oath or helped him go through the oath, and this has now become the province of the Chief Justice. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a significant
One
change.
thing that has
Absolutely.
not changed is the oath itself.
Right.
The words
from
are written in the U.S. Constitution. The exact oath is written in the Constitution. And George Washington added the words, "So help me God." And every other president since then has followed that example.
You know, and that's a good topic because I wanted to ask you about that specifically, Dr. James, and to kind of go along with this, is there any part of the process for you that you see has become more outdated?
Okay, so one thing that I failed to mention was the rise of mass media as major changes. These things are highly choreographed and televised affairs. Now we have, besides TV, we have social media and the internet that helps disseminate these speeches very broadly. And so, that changes the way that these things are produced. One of the things that I think is outdated or potentially something that we should focus our attention to is the role that religion plays in these ceremonies. So one says, "So help me God," after giving the oath, and they swear on one, sometimes two Bibles. And so despite being, officially a state without a state religion, there are, in this particular ceremony, significant religious undertones, right? And although, a majority of the country are Christian and probably find nothing out of sorts with such a tradition, I think that it has the potential to alienate people who are maybe Muslim or may come from non-religious perspective, atheists and things like that. And in my research, I have found that large segments of the population would find that a individual who is atheist or Muslim would be unqualified to be president even if they shared the same political party and political policy beliefs, suggesting a real penalty for not being a Christian. And these actions, these behaviors like swearing on a Bible or saying, swearing to God, have the potential to perpetuate the alienation, the political alienation of atheists and non-Christian individuals in our political system.
And that's something you think maybe should be looked at closer as we move forward and our country changes.
Well, I think that it's just something worth considering. I study norms, and norms are often things that go unseen because they're so routinized in our daily life. And so what I consider my job to be is just to shed light on the things that we don't normally think about.
And we may not think more than once about it. Yeah,
right.
Interesting. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. James. And we're going to take a pause on our conversation. We'll get to more of this coming up right after the break, including we'll take a look into what a second Trump inauguration and presidency means for the U.S. and why our analysts say no matter what side of the political aisle you fall on, there is much to celebrate about our democracy. We'll be right back. And welcome back on this episode of Straight Talk. We are taking a deeper dive into the traditions of Inauguration Day and how this year's is historic. My guest today, Carrie Timchuk with the Oregon Historical Society, and Dr. Chandler James, assistant professor at the University of Oregon of Political Science. Again, thank you so much for being with us today. First, I want to begin in this half hour now with Carrie. Before we went to break, we talked about what's noteworthy about this year. So I want to start with you. President-elect Trump will be the first president since Grover Cleveland to win 2 non-consecutive terms. What does this say about our time in history and his support?
Well, you look at the last 3 elections, President Trump's victory over Secretary Clinton, then President Obama's victory over Trump, and now Trump's victory over Vice President Harris, all of them very, very close. Just, a couple thousand votes in 2 or 3 states, and the battleground states would have switched it. So we're clearly in America that is very closely divided.
Yes.
Between parties, between philosophies. And the role of a president, of course, is to try to, you represent all the people, to try to unite the people and not divide them. That has been a challenge, to say the least, for President Trump in his first term and in his campaigns. And it'll be interesting to see if he goes against past behavior and maybe throws a little lifeline to the Democrat side, to the Congress, to others who may not have voted for him and who may not agree with him.
Well, and on that note, many people do feel Trump has been a divisive leader, messaging across his first term, both campaigns, for presidency, a lot of pitting one side against the other. We did recently hear from him. He did an interview with NBC's Kristen Welker about the theme of his inauguration speech. So here's what he had to say in that. Take a listen.
Let me ask you, sir, as you think about your inauguration, I remember your first inaugural address, you talked about American carnage. Have you thought about your message for your second inaugural address?
I have.
Can you give us a preview?
We're going to have a message that will make you happy. Unity. It's going to be a message of unity. And again, I think success brings unity. And I've experienced that. I've experienced it in my first term. As I said, we're going to be talking about unity. We're going to be talking about success, making our country safe, keeping people that shouldn't be in our country out. We have to do that. I know it doesn't sound nice, but we have to do that. But basically, it's going to be about bringing our country together.
So, Dr. James, I want to ask you, is there a precedent in the past where we have seen a president come into a second term with such a dramatic shift as far as their political positioning and their rhetoric and tone?
In terms of
kind of how he's setting this up.
So Trump is claiming that he will go from a kind of combative approach toward Democrats and his political opposition toward a posture of unity. And I would be surprised if that happened, but I would welcome it. I think that there have been major shifts in terms of one administration to the next of a president who served multiple terms. So George Bush came into office seeking kind of this posture of compassionate conservatism. His 2005 presidency was much more aimed at keeping America safe, and it was much more hard-nosed. Obama, too, was in 2008 a change candidate and talked about transcending our divisions and the tribalism of our politics. In 2012, his campaign, and when he was inaugurated in 2013, it was a much more partisan affair. So it's typical for presidents to change as they negotiate a new political environment. And I would hope that Trump seeks unity and offers a bone to Democrats and his political opposition.
Okay, and Carrie, Moving on from that a little bit, the balance of power has shifted, as you mentioned, throwing a bone maybe to the other aisle, the other part of the aisle. We've seen now both chambers of Congress now sworn in under Republican control. The White House now also under Republican control. What has history taught us about when power seems to be so heavily controlled by one party? And is it different when it's Republican controlled versus Democratic controlled?
Well, history teaches us be careful what you wish for. Because with one party in control of both houses of Congress and the presidency, American public knows who to blame. If things don't go well, who's to blame is quite clear. And you look at past administrations, President Obama's, President George Bush, both of them for a couple-year period had complete control. Things didn't go so well. In the next election, Congress switched. So
interesting.
American voters, it's quite clear who's in charge. A very narrow margin in the House, of course, just a handful of votes. But the midterm elections are less than 24 months away, and they're already looking to that, and that's what they're going to be judged. American voters will judge in November 24 who gets credit or who's to blame.
Interesting. We will see. And is it different when Democratic seems to hold the majority of the power or the Republican side does?
Well, they are able to advance their agenda, and the House and Senate have very different rules. The House, who's ever in the majority, can basically run the place as they please. The Senate, with its very different rules, it takes 60 votes usually to do anything, not 51. It takes 60 to stop a filibuster, to get cloture. It's 53 to 47. So the Senate's going to be much, much slower, as it always is.
Yes, can't just move right through.
Can't just move right through the Senate.
Okay. Dr. James, in most elections, about half of the public or more doesn't actually vote for the candidate that wins. So how can those people who, didn't vote for the winning candidates feel the American democratic system is actually working for them?
Well, I think going back to what Trump said to Welker, results matter a great deal. So if if he can bring prosperity, or the government can help support prosperity and growth in some of the crises abroad, that we just recently saw a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. If we could see a ceasefire or the end of the war in Ukraine, that might make people feel a little bit better, and then help to develop, America in terms of AI and technology, economic growth, and he claims to be a supporter of the working class. If he can increase real wage growth for working class Americans and bring some a pay increase for working class people, I think that a lot of folks who feel alienated by our political system might be more satisfied. And I think if he can, bring some trust and authenticity, be truthful to the American people, I think that would be really satisfying to folks who are really disaffected and alienated by our political system. And this isn't something that started with Trump or Biden, but dates back to the 1960s and 70s when Americans really lost faith in the federal government.
Well, just weeks ago, I'm sure you both watched as America watched during President Jimmy Carter's funeral service at the National Cathedral. During that ceremony, we saw all 5 living presidents attend, including President-elect Trump. In a break, there were clips of Obama and Trump that went viral. I don't know if you saw them, smiling, giggling at times. Is this heartening to you or encouraging when we see there are still moments of great unity that supersede political rhetoric or divide? Carrie, I'll start with you.
Absolutely. I mean, that's always been one of the norms of American politics, is when people put aside their partisan differences. We're Americans first, Republicans and Democrats after that. And President Reagan was very famous for his friendship with Tip O'Neill, who was the Democrat Speaker of the House. So they fought like cats and dogs, sometimes, but then when they would have a drink together, they'd get together, they'd laugh together, they'd tell jokes to each other. That's America needs more of that.
Yes. What about you, Dr. James? What do you think?
Well, I think it's nice to see that they have some rapport, but I think that we didn't see Harris or Biden or Clinton react to Trump in that way, or Bush, because of the way that he talked about them and their families over the course of his 3 campaigns. I don't think I understand that we want to have good rapport and we want to see them smiling and stuff, but Trump said some pretty awful stuff about Hillary Clinton, about Harris, that I think a lot of Americans aren't going to easily forget.
I appreciate both of you so much. Thank you so much for coming on our show today. We are out of time. Again, Carrie Timchuk with Oregon Historical Society, Dr. James with you both. Thank you both again. Over the next few weeks, we will be speaking with a new Multnomah County DA, Nathan Vasquez, and the leaders of the Oregon legislature as they begin a new session at the state capitol. Before we go, a reminder, you can stream Straight Talk on your own schedule anytime. You can download the free KGW Plus app, available now on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. We'll see you next week here on Straight Talk, and until then, be well, and thanks for watching.